Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Sri Lanka. Today is the 29th day of November. Yes, one more day to go and the 11th month is long way and gone. But thank you very much for joining us. Before we get officially to the holiday season, just like to inform you folks that starting on the 1st of December, of course, Sri Lanka's #1 hit music station, Yes 101, we'll be broadcasting live from Park Street. So we hope to see you guys there. It's going to be a lovely studio and something more, which I can't say right now, but you will know about it for sure. Now, checking on some interesting stories before we get to our special guest for today. If you've been following the entertainment pages, it's been talked about, and if you're a fan of the TV series called 2.5 Men, this is after teenage actor Angus T. Jones, who you will know as the half of the 2.5 Men. He plays Jake Harper. He has recently labeled the hit sitcom that gives him $325,000 per episode. That's how much he earns. He is, well, now he's 19. He's no longer considered a minor. But once upon a time, he was the highest paid minor in television, $325,000 per episode. He has recently labeled his hit sitcom as one of the most significant experiences in his life, thrashing experience in his life. He has said that it is the most immoral and the TV show should not be watched by anyone. And that he said that although he considers himself being part of the show a blessing, he cannot address everything that has been said or write every misstatement or misunderstanding, and that he said that it is trash. 3 days later, he started to apologize for his statement. I apologize if my remarks reflect me showing indifference to and disrespect of my colleagues and a lack of appreciation of the extraordinary opportunity of which I have been blessed. I never intended that. Question now is still up in the air. How creator Chuck Lorre and producer Peter Roth will react to that after he actually made those statements over and over again for the past couple of days. So that's Angus T. Jones, who you may well know as Jake from 2.5 Men. Also, interesting thing is also not too long ago, Charlie Sheen also made some trashing statements about the hit sitcom, and now he's not there anymore. Okay. Now, checking on some other interesting news. Sad development. If your child follows Sesame Street, there's one major character that's been missing from Sesame Street, and that is Elmo, because the fellow who actually, the puppeteer who voiced and who handles Elmo, is no longer there. He has recently resigned after another sexual allegation that this time, for the third time, has been thrown at him, and he decided to leave the TV series on PBS. I actually learned a lot from Sesame Street, although I'm not a big fan of Elmo. Let me just say that. And also, with regards to what we are been talking about for the past couple of weeks, we are, of course, discussing violence against women, and we are in the tail end of our discussion because the 16 days of activism has officially started on 25th of November, and it will end on the 10th of December, which is also the International Human Rights Day, if I'm not mistaken. And hopefully it will all culminate on the 1st of on sometime in February for a very special project that is dubbed as 1 Billion Rising, when 1 billion women and people who feel the same will apparently, according to what I've read, there will be a series of dances, flash mobs everywhere around the world to hopefully eradicate the violence against women. Well, for those who still need a definition of violence against women is a violation of women's fundamental human rights, and is both a cause and a consequence of women inequality. It includes rape and sexual abuse of girls, female genital mutilation, forced and early marriage, stalking, crimes in the name of honor, trafficking and sexual exploitation, sexual harassment, and domestic violence. From those words alone, they're very heavy. And the sad thing is, it actually happens even just right next door. So we'll talk about that when we come back. We need to take a very short break. When we come back, it's our discussion of violence against women with our very special guests, only here on Good Morning Sri Lanka. Welcome back to Good Morning Sri Lanka, and just like what we mentioned at the start of the show, we will have a discussion on the forum that's ongoing right now, kicked off on the 25th, which is we are now part of the 16 days of activism. It will all culminate on the 10th of December when we all celebrate the United Nations International Day of Human Rights. And let me just read into the Not a Minute More report from the UNIFEM. Says ending violence against women throughout the world. 1 in 3 women will be raped. This is staggering statistics. Throughout the world, 1 in 3 women will be raped, beaten, coerced into sex, and otherwise abused in her lifetime. Violence against women has become a much as pandemic as AIDS and HIV or malaria, but it still is downplayed by the public at large and policymakers who fail to create and fund programs to eradicate it. That is from the statement from the UNIFEM report of Not a Minute More. And we have with us inside the studio with us, interestingly enough, that violence against women has been compared as much as a pandemic as the HIV AIDS. He's been very much vocal about the AIDS campaign before. Now he's joining us as a representative of the male gender, the form of violence against women, simply known to me as Prabhu. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning. So it's interesting that like what I mentioned, violence against women has become as much as a pandemic as HIV, AIDS, or malaria. I know how when you were in the midst of the campaign to inform people about HIV, AIDS, it was quite frustrating for you because a lot of people dismiss it as it doesn't happen in Sri Lanka.
Yep.
And now, from most of the conversation we had so far, our guests have also quite noticed that some also dismiss that violence against women do not happen in the country, that we're all respectful of each other's rights, and being a woman is not a problem. You can go anywhere, do what you want, as long as it's within the limits of the law. How do you feel about this?
I mean, one thing, it's a challenge. Because as activists or so-called people who believe that everybody should have equal rights, women or whoever you are, if you're human. And I think it's a lot to do with our society and how we perceive things. It's not only for HIV and AIDS, violence against women, and I think it's only when things hit home that people start realizing this is true, because we become very ignorant and immune to what's happening around us, and I think it's very frustrating as people who are dealing with not just the condition like HIV and AIDS. This is a cultural issue, it's a social issue, it's a political issue, and it's really frustrating because you don't only have communities and people saying that there is no violence against women in our country and communities, but also people who are responsible, who make statements saying that it's not an issue in Sri Lanka. So it makes it really difficult for us who want to see the rights of women, women living life with dignity and freedom and being able to do what they wish to do with their lives, like we all men do.
Yeah. But if you could just tell us, without revealing too much, if you'd rather, we were hoping that you would take us through the journey. What made you go from what I've known you before as the HIV/AIDS advocate to now violence against women? What made you? I know you're still there with the HIV/AIDS campaign, but what made you transition now into concentrating on the issues of violence against women?
I mean, as an activist or as a person who wants to promote human rights of people, you realize that one right doesn't supersede the other, and you realize HIV and AIDS is an issue, and it's very much connected to violence against women. I mean, if you look at the HIV stats in Sri Lanka, most of the women that I've met who are living with HIV and AIDS, about 80% of them got HIV, contracted HIV from their husbands, and they're women, and the way the society perceives them, looks at them, as if they've brought it upon themselves, they've done something wrong with their lives, and the suffering and the harassment they face as women, which is really unfair. And I think what has really enlightened me is that as a young person, or as a person who represents people, that we can't hold camps saying I'm only working for HIV and AIDS, I'm only working for prevention of violence against women, because you realize that these affect women children
They're
and
interconnected.
men. And also in any disaster, any situation, you realize that children and women are mostly affected because they're vulnerable. And I think that's kind of the motivation you realize. And as a child, I've seen violence happening at home. I've seen violence happening around me against women, and it's a personal commitment that I made to myself that I will never do it, and I will always speak out against it. And I think it's something that's within me, and I'm very passionate about. So that's why, you know.
Well, as far as I remember, it's been for a couple of years. The channel has been very supportive on the forum on violence against women. But it is only this year that I think we have as many gentlemen joining us for the discussion than the previous years. Do you see a pattern now, or do you see an awakening for the gentlemen about this issue, that it is not a question of who is the weaker side. It's just a question of we are all human and deserve to be treated equally. Have you seen a certain
globally there's a shift in the work, if I say programming on gender, from just working with women to also including men in the interventions, because you realize we live in a patriarchal system, and you also know that men are the majority perpetrators, and there's absolutely no way that you can empower or work against eliminating violence against women without getting men in the discussion. And so there's been a programming shift globally, and they realize that men, you need to engage them, and B, also there are men who are good men, who are allies for women's empowerment, who want to speak out on behalf of women. And there are two reasons. One is self-realization of men, seeing that, and also like the space for men to get involved in women's issues becoming wider, and women's groups also accepting the fact that men are not all bad, and we also need to work with men, and also men can change, and sometimes they are also prisoners of their own circumstances, childhood traumas. So it's important, it's an important shift, and it's happening in Sri Lanka, and you realize that it's more active, people are getting more involved, vocal, and they're not afraid to speak out on behalf of women. And it's something, I think it's only the right direction that we are taking, because I think there's absolutely no way that your program, the work that you do, can be sustained if you don't get men involved in the decision.
You raise a very good point that you can't have a forum on violence against women without having, the matters being, the perpetrators involved in the discussion. When you started talking to men about educating them that when you hit a woman, even just what they may say, just a simple slap on the shoulder or the face, a derogatory remark, is actually violence against them, and this is not a show of love or for you to discipline them in some way. How was it received?
There are several reactions. One, one in shock, in denial, and as in, who are you to tell me what I do, as almost like this is my property, and another, when you further an interest to further listen to what I have to say, and some people just ignore, and it doesn't matter. And then also like the surprising thing is not the men's reactions, it's the women's reaction, because it's always the women most of the times who defend their husbands, and who somehow in some sense try to make sense for themselves and say it's okay because he loves me.
Okay,
and,
we will hold on that statement. If you're thinking to yourself, did he just say that it's actually the women justifying the acts of the husband? We'll get to that, but first we need to take a very short break. When we come back, more of our discussion with